Is it possible to run a workshop off the grid? If so, what equipment is required? Let's talk about that. Welcome to DIY Volts. I built a 20 by 30 workshop this past summer, and I have just now hooked up my off-grid system. I've got 2 kilowatts of solar outside. I've got a 15 kilowatt hour lithium iron phosphate battery, and also a 12K inverter back here on this side. These are the things that I have running my workshop. I'm also able to flip over to grid power if need be. So let's go ahead and walk through my system real quick, and I will show you the equipment required, and then also we will see the solar coming in and turn on some big loads here in the workshop to see everything in action. Let's start off by looking at the solar that's going into my workshop. Now there are 3 kilowatts of solar back here, but I only have 2 kilowatts going to this particular off-grid inverter and battery. So I have built a ground mount, and this just has my panels facing up into the sky, and when the sun hits that, it sends DC power inside my building. So it's kind of an overcast day, but I think we'll still be able to see some power getting into the system. So just wanted to point that out. Let's go back inside and take a look at the electronics. Back inside, I want to follow the power coming in from the solar panels, and that is through this piece of conduit down here, and that goes up to a breaker box. And this breaker box just has a couple of breakers inside, which I can use to turn off the solar if I need to, and that then goes up and around behind the battery over to the Lux Power Inverter. I'll show you how those solar cables connect here in just a moment, but let's talk about the LuxPower 12K. This inverter is a pure sine wave inverter capable of producing 12,000 watts output. Now it has 2 different legs, so it is a 240 volt machine. It's got the 6,000 watts on one side and 6,000 watts on the other for a combined of 12K. It can also handle up to 18,000 watts of solar, which is pretty impressive. It's got multiple different MPPT charge controller inputs, and you can have multiple strings of solar coming into this unit to charge up your batteries. So this unit has a nice display up here with all kinds of menus, and we may take a look at some of those here real quick. Let's go ahead and take a tour around the outside of this, and then get back to how the power is flowing through this system. This inverter weighs right at 130 pounds, and it was quite a beast to be able to put up on the wall here. Luckily it does have some handles which will let you grab onto and pull it up, and it's got a mounting system that slides on pretty quick and easy. You just have to be able to hoist this thing up there. Here is where you can turn off the inverter. It's for PV charging, and over here is the emergency stop, or a rapid shutdown stop I should say. This allows you to connect to Wi-Fi, and I'll show you that here in just a moment. Like I said, there's a nice display. I'll get into those settings here in just a bit. Over here on this side, there are 3 little clasps, and that allows you to open up here and see the inside of the inverter. So the things that I'm going to be talking about here in just a moment are communications with the battery, breakers, battery connections, more breakers. You've got your AC output and grid connections. You've got grounding, and there's also connection for the solar over there as well. But before we get into that, let me just show you some of these menus. This is touchscreen, so whenever I press it, it will turn on, and now you can see all of the display there. So for instance, voltage on the solar panels, about 280 volts, 155 watts coming in up here. Down here, the battery's at 100% at 55.6 volts. And my building is only using 145 watts, as you can see right here. And the reason it's going back and forth between 2 and 145 is because of some of the electronics I have here in the building. Up here, it's got the PV energy. So today it's got 1.8 kilowatts, the total 23.5. So this system has not been in operation for all that long. Now over here, it's got the today's charge energy and the total. Over here is export. I have no grid connection here, and in the consumption right there you can see 1 kilowatt hour. Now this, you can go into settings and see various charts, You can see if there's any faults or alarms. And then in this menu here is where you're going to see a lot of your information you need to set up. So for instance, what you're going to charge at, you can go into how you want this to discharge. The advanced menu is important for, let's say, off-grid setting right here. And then I can move down and see other settings for setting up batteries and things. There's a little bit of information on debug and then device information. Most of the time it just stays on this screen so you can see what's happening. Now that you've seen the menus, let's open this back up and take a look at some of how the wiring is in here. So first of all, I've got the solar going in right here into the PV1 input. So that's just the solar input for the panels from outside. And that is going to allow the battery to be charged. So this battery I've got uses 4 different cables, 2 of the positive, 2 of the negative. I can turn the battery off at any time using the breakers up above that. And then over here is where I have the AC output. I'm using a cable that goes to a transfer switch, which we'll go over that here in just a minute as well. But for now, let's consider the battery. So the power from solar is going to go over here to this battery. This is the Ethos 48 volt lithium iron phosphate whole house battery from Big Battery. I'll have a link to all this stuff down below if you want to check it out. This battery is a 15 kilowatt hour battery, and so you can see there are 3 different battery modules, 5K each, and that is what makes the 15K. So here are the 4 different connections for where the battery cables go into the control box. There is a display up top here, which is very limited information, but it will be good to just see the state of charge and that you have your communications set up. So for instance, state of charge, 100%, 300 amp hour capacity, and then down here you've got communication protocol is doing what it's supposed to do there. Now, the blue cable you saw in the inverter is part of this system right here, and that is communication between the control box, each of the battery modules, and the inverter. So back over here in the inverter, you can see I've got this communication port right here, and that's what allows the inverter to read the state of charge on the battery and be able to use it as it needs to. This battery was pretty simple to set up, and it seems to be top quality, so I definitely recommend checking them out. And they've got other models as well, which will show up here on this channel soon. So back over here to the inverter, we now have the AC output, which is the black, red, white, and green wires right here. So the neutral and the ground go to their own separate bus bars, and then the black and red are part of the load 1 and load 2. And those go down a 30 amp cable. Now you can hardwire this in if you expect to need more power than what I've got coming into my shop. But that cable goes down behind the battery up to a transfer switch. So let's talk about what this is. This is a 10 slot transfer switch, and I have all 10 of my circuits being used here for my workshop. Now, what is a transfer switch? It's a box that allows for 2 different inputs. So grid input and off-grid input in my example here. So I've got my solar power with my inverter and my battery going to this input right here, and I also have my panel over here where I can use grid power. So both grid power and off-grid power are coming to this box, and depending on the position of these switches up here, I'm using either grid or off-grid. And so these breakers here go to the same circuits that these do over here. It's just based upon which position of the switch these are currently in. So I've currently got off-grid on everything but this one circuit, and that's because there is a heater on here. But there's enough sun out today, we should go ahead and flip this over, turn that heater on, and see a much higher output here on the LuxPower. So just keep in mind, I've got this box right here controlling whether it's on the grid or off the grid. So as soon as I flip one of these switches, it basically takes the power back to my box over here and uses the grid power. To answer the question from the beginning of this video, yes, it is absolutely possible to run a workshop off-grid, and the equipment I have back here is actually a lot fancier than you would have to have unless you're running some pretty big loads. So now that you've seen the basic walkthrough of the system, let's turn on a lot of stuff here in the shop and see the solar coming in and see the battery being discharged as I turn on that heater and all the lights here in the shop. So let's go ahead and see what this thing is capable of. Here's the heater. I'm just going to bring this temperature up for a moment to get that to turn on, and we will see how it's doing here on this inverter. Might as well turn on every light we have in the place just to see how well this does. Every light in here is on. Heater is running. The off-grid power is 2,248 watts, and we currently have 548 watts of solar coming in. Battery, 99%. I turned on one more set of lights and I've got 2,316 watts and still about 530 watts coming into the building. So as you can see, I can run a lot of stuff here, but if I were to run that heater for too long, it would drain my 15 kilowatt hour battery decently quick, especially at night. Let's talk about power consumption in your workshop or home real quick. So out here you can see that with all my lights running, my heater, I could have a chop saw, I could have a table saw, laser engraving machine, CNC, and sander, all kinds of stuff running out here, and not even get close to using the 12,000 watts that this power inverter can produce. That being said, judge your power needs, and you can buy a 6K inverter instead of this 12. So that could definitely save you a good bit of money. Now, all of the equipment you see was sent to me for one of my other YouTube channels, and so I did not purchase this stuff. However, if you want a 10% off discount code, I'll have that link in the description down below. And if you don't need that much battery or that much inverter, scale it down, because this is a lot for a shop this size. Now in a home, these two, ideal. There are definitely times that you will need power like this, especially if you're running a dryer and washing machine and dishwasher, all those really high powered appliances in your home. All right, that's what I got for you today. I hope you've enjoyed the video. Be sure to write me some comments down below and I will try my best to get back to them. I'm just starting off with this system, and so everything is still a bit new, but I have to say it is a solid system and working well. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.